And welcome to the latest edition of CFES Brilliant Pathways webinar series. Today's edition, titled How to Build and Sustain a Successful Learning and Teaching School That Reaches All Students. Couldn't think of a more timely guests to have for this topic. CFES has schools across the country, and when COVID-19 hit, threw everybody for a hard loop for sure. And people responded as best they could in different ways. And I had some time, fortunate enough to spend some time in Beekman Town, which is a Gear Up school, CFES Gear Up school, and was pretty much blown away by the way they managed to, it seemed to me to flip a switch, and they went to a virtual learning school with almost, it seemed like without a hitch. I'll let the guests, I'm sure there were some hitches, but they had a 97% log-on rate by students, which is, phenomenal. Amongst all schools. But let me go ahead and introduce our special guest. We got Dan Manick, Superintendent of Beekman Town Central School District. That's in upstate New York, not too far from Plattsburgh for the uninitiated. Gary Lambert is Director of 21st Century Learning at Beekman Town. So they've been spent much time together working on this. But would love it, Dan, if you could start off and tell a little bit. I think your background's real interesting at BOCES, and pandemic planning, something you're used to, but certainly took a few years to get it kind of built into the culture there at Beekman Town, and how you got it rolling come by COVID time.
Thanks. Sure. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, John, for having us in Brilliant Pathways. And it kind of goes without saying, I got to thank all the administrators and teachers who have helped us, who are still here with us or who have left and helped us along the way. It's been a great journey. And I'm glad to have our Director of 21st Century Learning, Mr. Lambert, with us, who's always with me on these types of calls or programs. So a little bit about my background. I was started out as a coach and a substitute and moved to a teaching assistant, then went into, became a teacher, became an administrator, then moved to BOCES. And as BOCES, I was a labor relations specialist. And I think it was back in the N1H1 times when we started really having to think about pandemic planning and how would that work with staff and schools. And I remember the superintendents doing the hard work of preparing for that, preparing if they had to drop off packets. And luckily that never hit, but the work to prepare was there. And I remember vividly looking at, well, how powerful is a pandemic? What can it do? And ever since then, I think I've been morbidly drawn to these types of situations, whether it's Ebola or bird flu or now COVID. So yeah, we went on a journey when I came to Beekman Town and really wanted to prepare our kids for the 21st century. And it was early on in that first year where, well, right from the beginning, Gary will tell you that we talked about finally committing to having this place have Wi-Fi. And people wanted it to be Wi-Fi because state testing was going to be computer based. And we were like, that's not really a great reason to invest, $400,000 to be a Wi-Fi. And this district is actually really was the poorest in terms of free and reduced lunch district in our BOCES. So we were used to being that, I'm going to say, the have-nots, and it was certainly perceived that way with great people, and it's been the people that made the difference here. So anyways, we started having that conversation. We're going to go Wi-Fi, but we need it to be more than that. So Gary mobilized our tech committee, and I remember walking into that meeting and saying to the committee, I'm not going to be here very much. Gary's going to lead the way, but I don't want you to think we can't do anything. Like, your job is to dream big. Our job is to figure out how we're going to do that. And the tech committee mobilized, and as they were mobilizing, we were working the back channels on if they chose this or trying to be one step ahead. And once they kind of came out with a plan, we then built a leadership team and started taking them on a journey on why we wanted to do this and why we wanted to be a 21st century school and potentially be a one-to-one school and all the things we are now. And it's been absolutely phenomenal. So I can go into more in depth there if you need to.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I do think it's interesting, you said when you had a number of volunteers came forward and then you got that buy-in, and you took some trips around the country, and you really got to hear some pretty, I thought, powerful stories about students. So, it's pre-COVID. People are thinking we need to be a 21st century learning school for different reasons. You've had kids who are sick. They can do the work from home, no problem. So they were kind of used to it. But you met a young man and a young woman as well, I think, in Florida and maybe Montreal that, they had already been using it, and it kind of changed their life a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Gary was with me at both adventures as he normally is, and we took two different teams. We've taken teams all over the place. We went to FETC in Florida and ISTE in San Antonio, and we invested a lot of money into this initiative because it was that worthwhile for us. But the one in particular is that the two that you're talking about is we went into what's the name of the school in Montreal? Lakeside?
Lakeside Academy.
Lakeside Academy, which is a public school in Montreal, and it was really good. They had really good admin, and we talked to a few teachers. We went in a room, and the first student, it was our first visit in-person teaching, and I went into the room, and the first person I talked to was this young lady, and I said, "Do you like working, teaching and learning on your Chromebook?" And she goes, "I love it." And she was a middle school young lady. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I was out 6 weeks and I was able to stay on pace with my kids." I was sold. I was in right there. And then Gary and I were in Montreal for the other story is actually another Montreal story, totally different event. But Gary, why don't you take it away? Because I know you're as passionate about this one as I was.
Well, so we were at it wasn't a full-blown Google Summit, but it was a conglomeration of a bunch of different school districts coming together to discuss best practices. And virtually all of them were G Suite for Education schools. And there was this one who also was a middle school student, and he was kind of a de facto guest speaker for the event. And he was visibly moved and choked up, talking about how grateful he was to have been given the tools that he was given, because he was the kind of kid that could have been overlooked in a traditional classroom, and he was able to rise to the same level, if not more than his peers, and was being reached where it mattered for him. So he was engaged in ways that he never would have been able to previously. And he showed pictures of him when he first started using computers, and he was pointing up at the screen at his former self, and he goes, "Yeah, that's me. It's not the me that I am now." And he literally said, "I owe who I am to Google and to digital teaching and learning." And that was powerful for a student of his age to have a realization for how technology changed the pathway of his life, because there are so many kids that don't see the connection, even, no matter what, in spite of our best efforts, many of them don't see the connections between education and success. And here's one who directly saw it and was validating the reasons that we were there and making this journey. It was very confirmational.
Gary, and he actually teared up. This young man
Absolutely
teared up in the crowd, and it was just so moving. And it was shortly thereafter, we had actually, as you brought up, we had sought volunteers to move forward in this vision that the tech committee kind of started. And we were hoping to have like 5 or 10 volunteers, and we ended up with over 30. And our job was to take them on a journey, take the kids on a journey, take the teachers on a journey like they couldn't believe. And late in that year, we were in another room it was a 4th grade room. Yeah, it was a 4th grade room. And one of the kids asked us, we were just watching, like evaluating what was going on. And one of the students, who's now going to be a freshman, goes, "Hey, Mr. Lambert, this is awesome. This classroom is awesome, but none of the other teachers are doing this in 5th grade. How do we make this happen into other grades?" Because the kids wanted it and the parents wanted it. The boy didn't know, but Gary knew that those 5th grade teachers had already signed up to be the second wave.
And the reason that they signed up was because we used the power of professional persuasion for the 4th grade colleagues, saying, "Hey, these kids have benefited so much from having these opportunities? Do you want to be the reason that they stop having these opportunities? And that was so much more powerful than any administrator walking in a room and trying to, we certainly did do that. We certainly did encourage them. So it was coming from a lot of angles, but the power of a colleague saying, hey, this is something that can help not only you as a professional, but it's certainly going to help your students. And yeah, from there, the ball just started rolling really quickly in the right direction.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think sometimes we forget, like we have these plans and we do them, like who are we doing them for and why? And you talk to the kid and you're like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Dan?
Yeah, it's just that the one thing we asked for the teachers in return of going on this journey was they had to share with subsequent people how their journey's going, because I guess we had confidence in what we were going to do. And I still remember the auditorium being packed, as the rest of the school was looking like, who are all these teachers with Chromebooks and why are they getting these things? And why are the kids so pumped up? And we had a panel up there, and the panelist, former teacher of ours, brilliant teacher, said, two in particular said, the district said they were going to take us on a journey. And they said that we were going to be allowed to fail on this journey because we were building it, as we move forward. And folks, and she's saying this to all these other teachers, they were right. They allowed us to fail and eventually succeed at such a high level that it's just been so promising. And I remember sitting in that audience going that, that's what we needed.
Yeah.
And and one other teacher made another observation that Dan and I like to reflect on quite frequently, where they said, I've been around this district for a number of years, and this is one of the first times that I feel like the district has under-promised and over-delivered. And I can do so much more than they ever even suggested I would be able to. And that kind of buy-in, I stopped calling it buy-in. I called it embracement, because the teachers weren't just being convinced of something. They totally saw the benefit both for them and their students. And now if you tried to take digital teaching and learning away from our teachers, there would be a riot. It's so embedded in our culture now.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's really helpful for our administrators and principals and teachers and students who are listening now. Dan, what would you say? So I think it's schools that are, weren't quite far along in the process when COVID hit. So spring comes and, it's a little bit of a scramble for some more than others, who don't have the, say, luxury of a couple of years of building it up like you all did, which they still could have and will, of course, I'm sure. But how about now? Like, if you were in their position, you were kind of having to figure out, like, how do I get this going this quickly? And most importantly, and I think this is the money question, how do you get the kids to log on? I mean, okay. We talked to Chris Bishop in Dorchester, Mass. 100% connectivity, digital divide is not an issue. Still, they're working hard, but there's a high percentage of kids that aren't moving on. So you've got the infrastructure, but how are you getting the kids to log on?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the first part of those places that are just kind of starting to be like, we have to do this because of the situation we're in. All the research shows that it won't really work over time if you just hand out Chromebooks, right, and give them, some platform and give the kids the Chromebooks. We knew that. That's part of the journey we went on. We spent half a year at least investigating what works and what doesn't work. So what those schools have been forced to do is something we know won't work, and we can tell you the schools that did it in locally and around the world that it doesn't work. So you've got to think, how am I going to build this, build this excitement or build the capacity with my teaching staff, because that's the key to make them 21st century digital natives in a short period of time. But then I would really tell everybody is, once this thing starts dying down, this pandemic, is you've really got to look at the roadmap. And since now you have probably the tools, you got to actually build it the right way if you want to have this for any sustained period of time. So that's really, really important. But in terms of how do you have the kids log on, you build up your capacity and your people, and the people become really skilled at utilizing not everything that's out there, because it is like drinking out of the fire hose. Just a couple, find the pieces that you think are going to work for you. For us, it was Google. It doesn't matter what you use, iPads, Chromebooks. That's not the secret. The secret is maximizing your tools to improve teaching and learning. And once you do that, and you just say to the kids, we have high expectations here. This is school, and it's different, but this is school, and we're going to treat it like school. You're probably going to get the buy-in. Now, I think Boston and Massachusetts and other places, even locally here, they said like, oh, everybody's going to pass, or we're just going to do pass-fail. Kids know that. They know, they know what they have to do now to pass. Virtually nothing. We actually put in one thing we did, which was met with some resistance from even local schools, was you increased your grade point average a percentage, not 1%, but there was a fraction of your grade was based on your attendance and your grit and perseverance. So what better way to showcase that you're ready for the 21st century than showing up for work every day? And showing up for work every day translates, right? So the work was school. So I think that's one of the reasons why we had high attendance, is we had high expectations for our kids. They had the tools, and it was awesome. One of the kids who's going to Amherst was speaking at graduation, and he was joking with his classmates that finally all the teachers who are really good here, but the kids are better with this stuff, right? And he was joking that the teachers finally caught up to the kids, which is actually a left-handed compliment, right?
Yeah, I think that's in an issue everywhere. I mean, some of the planning for this in Vermont, they've talked a lot about educating the parents. So, the students, some of these kids, we talked about in Boston, they've got tough situations. Parents aren't around at all. Really difficult to work with them. And, Chris Bishop's done a great job with going house to house to try and get them to log on and work with them as best he can. But some of the parents, when they are around, they don't know if the kids are doing it or not, because they don't know how to do it themselves. So there's been a lot of work on trying to educate the parents. Was that a piece for you too at all? Was it to kind of buy-in of parents, but also maybe so they know had some feeling for how to use the technology?
So one of the things that we did on a weekly basis, we had a Wednesday, we called it a tech jam, and we had opportunities for all district staff to join in a large, basically impromptu professional development session where we focused on specific issues that people were having so that we could address them all at the same time. But by doing that, we were equipping these staff members with the language, the vocabulary, the expertise to be able to share with those parents, because it's hard to explain something to a parent if you're not solid or feeling like you know it well enough to teach it, right? But if we're supporting the teachers so that they can do that, that went a long way. And back to that first point about, what would you say to districts that are, that were thrown into this last spring and that are looking to do this again? I would say a couple of things. Some of the tools that we decided on, Superintendent Mannix gave me at least a couple of weeks a heads up to say, we may be going to a remote teaching and learning model. I need you to put together a plan. And we brainstormed here, but we kept it very simple. We built the scaffolding of those important items that staff would absolutely have to use and be familiar with. And on that scaffolding, they would layer whatever tools they were comfortable with beyond that. So, the communications piece of it, the learning management piece of it, those were the attendance piece of it, the monitoring piece of that. Those were kind of four of the big pillars. And we made sure that we focused our trainings with those staff so that we were hitting those pillars, so that every single day that went by, they were getting stronger, building that foundation. So I would suggest that districts that are trying that, round two, go back and look at what worked, obviously, but also look at what didn't work and why. And for some situations, I'm going to guess that it was because there wasn't standardization, there wasn't enough people pulling from the same rope to head that district in the right direction. And so I think that was really, really helpful to get everybody, including the parents, knowing that, oh, my kid did this in this classroom, it's the same thing in another classroom, right? It's not the time to introduce 1,000 new tools for students or for the parents at this point.
So Gary, to Dan's point earlier, it almost sounds like you pick the technology, not that it's not, that's important, you know, but almost in a way, it's not that important. You pick one that works for you, and then it's conformity across the whole system.
To the extent possible. Obviously, we know that there are some, you know, outlier situations, but for the most part, it was, hey, well, I'll tell you, the day before or 2 days before we went to remote instruction, I led a PD session with all teachers in the district, introducing them to Google Meet. 99.7% of them had never heard of Google Meet before, and it was the tool that they depended on to do what they did. So you can't argue that just because we've been doing this for a while that all our teachers knew it all. No, most of them hadn't seen this tool, but it was that steady reinforcement of, okay, we're not going to do this, that, and the other thing. We're going to stick to this one platform, because when you do that, you have colleagues that you can rely on to bounce ideas off of. If you're in your own silo, you're on your own. But when you are all heading in the same direction, standardized, it really, really helps having those tech mentors that we have, you know, encouraged over the years. And it's not just the IT department that's helping, it's anybody that uses the tools can be that go-to person for you. So I think that honestly is, the people made it work. It's not the technology that made it work. The technology was there. It would be ridiculous to suggest that it wasn't, but the people working together is what made it work. And that's sometimes in some organizations, that's the difficult part. The technology is the easy one.
Yeah, it is. Would you say, so this research lately has shown, oh, go ahead, Dan, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, we must have lost connection for a second. I was just talking about, we would call home when kids didn't log on. One of the reasons why I had a high attendance rate too is not only were we skilled at what we're doing, and kids know that, and the high expectations, but quite frankly, if a kid cuts a class, you know, parents should let the adults know that's not, you know, just because we were teaching digitally, that was still in effect.
Yeah. So you had them call, if a kid didn't log on, someone called the house every day?
If kids were absent that day, you know, if they met the criteria to be present, just like regular school, you can come in and then sometimes you have to leave. But if you met the criteria to be in, you're in. But if you didn't, you know, the teacher would call or admin would call or somebody was following up. There's no doubt about it.
I'm sure you got different responses when you called the home, but I'm assuming that most parents were like, oh, thanks for the heads up. And
yeah, I mean, most parents want their student to have an education, so they want to know, like, this is a shared journey we're on here. There's a little bit of trust here, and you're kind of breaking the trust. And you know, it did seem to have an impact, and we didn't end up like a lot of schools where they had to stop teaching on June 1st, right? We taught all the way through, teach to the bell, teach to the end of the year. We taught to the end of the year, and kids were there. Listen, we're working right now, spending hours and days on improving what we did. So we have plenty of mistakes and plenty of things that wasn't perfect at all, but the continuous improvement model for us will pay dividends for our kids.
Yeah, I want to talk about moving forward a little bit, because I know you've got plans for the coming year. Real quick though, without getting too far in the weeds, maybe it's for you, Gary, but we've talked to some teachers, and a little bit of research is starting to show that you can have the technology set up and everybody's on board, but if the actual classes aren't engaging, the kids, they don't care. And a lot of it's on the teachers in some way to make it an interactive, engaging experiences. Tell us about that a little bit. Was that key for you all, or was it?
It is. Well, technology is a great amplifier, right? It amplifies success and it amplifies mediocrity as well. And if you're a teacher that is kind of a humdrum teacher and you're not getting engagement in a normal classroom, introducing technology is not going to change that. It's actually going to amplify that, and kids are going to see even more so that wow, this teacher is not speaking to me at my level. But what we found by and large is because we've encouraged our teachers, as Superintendent Mannix said, to try things and to fail by finding those tools that will work for them, it inherently makes that class more engaging because nobody wants to be bored, right? The teacher doesn't want to be bored either. So if they can find a tool that engages the students, whether they're in person using a digital device or whether they're remote using a digital device, that makes it more interesting for everybody. And encouraging people to try things and to find what works for them, that we found a lot of success there. And I think even some of our teachers who were a bit reticent about using technology, especially when they went to remote instruction, they got it. They knew that we weren't just, trying to justify an IT department. We were providing them the tools to survive in that scenario. And maybe, just maybe, when this is all said and done, those skill sets that they've acquired will carry over and become part of their normal routine, as it has for so many of the teachers in our district.
Super quick story here. I was walking into a global history class, which is probably not what you think of like a really fun, engaging, tee hee ha ha type of class, right? And the kids had their smartboards and they had their Chromebooks, and they were laughing and engaged back and forth. And if you were just looking at it, you thought they were almost fooling around, but they were playing a competitive game with global history content and having a great time doing it, right? So that teacher was using technology to amplify learning and having the kids actually, be competitive in their learning. I mean, what more do you want? So.
That's a great example. It's like, you can actually have fun virtually on, it doesn't have to be sage on the stage, it's a person talking for 40 minutes. And I think it seems like you've been ahead of the curve on a number of things. So I'm curious, and I think the people who would watch this would be very curious to see tell us a little bit about your year ahead. You've been planning a lot for it. Sounds like it's going to be a bit of a hybrid structure. So how is that looking right now?
Yeah, so our year we're going to have in-person, well, if, we're doubtful starters. I'm going to start with that. We'll see where we go. But right now we're scheduled to start first day with kids on the 11th. We pushed the day back. So 70% of our families want in-person, 30% of our families want complete virtual school. So we're establishing a virtual school with much better expectations than what we just talked about. And we're writing down everything for teachers, parents, and students so that they know what's going to be the deal here. That's exciting. In the classroom, we're getting some resistance, not to the virtual learning, but to having cameras in the classroom for students who may need to take an elective to graduate. So they might have a classroom with 4 kids sitting in it in person and 4 kids online on probably a bad, like maybe it's 7 and 7, so that there's 14 kids, but 7 are in person, 7 are virtual, because that's a course a kid needs to move forward with. So that's what we're planning for to get out of the gate.
And do you think there's been a lot of talk about places that didn't have a virtual teaching and learning, now they have it and they think, okay, once the pandemic is through and we're back to normal, if it's ever that way again, how much of the technology piece do you expect? I mean, you kind of already had it. Obviously, you're not going to remain a virtual school, but do you think you'll use it even more or less? Or am I wrong? Maybe you will.
Well, so my goal isn't to have a virtual school. That's not our goal here at Beatmantown at all. But I would definitely think that there will be virtual schools. They have them in other states. They have them in Florida. They have them in other states. Why doesn't New York have a virtual school? And when you think about snow days, sickness, those kids that want to be a skier or a golf player, they circle the globe doing their athletics, or maybe their parents are that type of have a type of career that's what they do. Why wouldn't you have a virtual school in New York, whether it's Beatmantown or just a virtual school with different satellites? You could do that quite easily. So I do see an amazing opportunity to really prove that we can transition from an agrarian calendar school year to a 21st century school year. So if you said, okay, Beatmantown, you've got to provide 180 days of education, show me how you're going to do that, like what they're doing right now. we might be able to come up with something far better than what we've been boxed into right now. And my question is, if we can do it now at a high level, why can't we do it post-pandemic at a high level? And I say we globally, New York, the world, or the United States.
Yeah.
So I don't want to scare people from Beatmantown. It's not like I'm not going to have the rest of Beatmantown kids staying home.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they want to come in sports and the whole thing. I mean, I think that's a good segue into kind of mental health issues and the reality of being online all the time. And
yeah,
how do you, I mean, we have Brett and Mallory, our CFDS fellows there that are really trying to think outside the box in terms of mentoring kids and how can they work with them. They did a athlete hour, which was great. They had coaches on and students could come on and ask questions about college and careers and things. How are you sensing there's more of a need to sort of connect with the kids just outside, away from the traditional virtual classroom to just help them get through this time?
Oh yeah, for sure. So actually our virtual school, we built in a half day in person just for those kids that need that. They can receive counseling services or meet with a teacher in person. But certainly our students need to have that engagement with others. So yeah, Brett and Mallory for us have been terrific, and they were another part of that high expectation. School is going to continue, and they were going to be part of it, and they were great, great in helping us. But yeah, we do need to make sure that, like we were talking about, I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was today, having a study hall almost, where we have a Google Meet or even chat rooms where kids can just do what we're doing and just laugh and tell jokes, utilizing our technology, giving them some social time if they're home or if we're on like pause again. So how do we facilitate that connection between kids? We think it's valuable, so we're probably going to do it.
That's a great point. I mean, just what you said, kids are in the hall, half of their school, a large part of their school day is they're interacting either in sporting events or in the hallway. To have a free space where they could just do that. It's not quite the same, but still virtually, that would be powerful, I think.
Yeah. It also makes the classroom experience a better one because they're not trying to squeeze that in to the times where they do see their peers. Right. It allows that virtual classroom time to be more focused when they've kind of gotten it out of their system.
Right. So you don't want to be on digital detention and you can't go see your friends because you were fooling around in class. Right. So be good in class, and we're going to set this up for you. If you want to be class clown, you're not going to get that opportunity later.
That's a new term. Digital. I hadn't heard digital detention yet. It's a real thing. All right. Hey, are there any other issues too? I want to make sure I leave this open. Any, Gary, or issues that I haven't brought up that you think would be helpful to educators listening, either about setting up a program or, they're kind of all into it now. So it's, they're looking to make it better than the spring, but feel free to, is there anything we didn't touch on that you think might be valuable?
I think the fact that, again, messaging and communication is so vitally important for any large organization, but especially school districts who are communicating with such diverse populations. And I think taking the time to think through what are parents going to have questions about, understanding what they don't know, and providing venues, whether it's web pages or chat rooms. Just to give you an example, we set up our student-run help desk, helped support through the 3 months that we were doing remote teaching and learning. Instead of having our student help desk members sitting at a desk, they were manning or staffing a virtual chat room so that parents and students that had technical issues could chat with them. We set that up in a day and then communicated that out to our community. That's one example of making sure that you're addressing the variety of needs. It's not just enough to set up, the structure. You've got to have supports in place to make sure that it continues to work, and being thoughtful about thinking some of those things through certainly pays dividends, both with how things work, but also how the community supports you because they understand that you've got their back.
So, and one of those supports, and this might be my closing comments here on that question, is one of those supports has to be the journey, right? so often we move into education because we want to have a wonderful journey with kids and take kids to places they haven't gone before. But doing this as a stopgap measure is wonderful, and I salute everybody, even our teachers, who had to do it that way, because not everybody was in the same place. But moving forward, when this is all done, you're going to have to hit the pause button, and you're going to have to figure out what's the real journey we can take these people on to make sure that they really understand the power here, the power of connections, and the power of what you have in front of you. And if you don't do that, then it's just, if you have history and research will show that it's going to be wasted dollars and a wasted opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good place to close it. Maybe I did want to mention one thing about, I think cost is a question on a lot of people's minds. You know, how much does it cost to set it up? Dan, you had said some really interesting stuff. Like, you had no money when you first started launching these things.
Yeah.
So you basically, I need volunteers, you know, and you, I think, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, you changed his current title from something that was a little more, not archaic, but it wasn't up to date. So you changed his title, that's free. You applied to some grants, you didn't get them right away, but there was some positions that you didn't rehire that you funneled toward the effort. Talk just a little bit, some schools are like, we can't afford to do it right, but I think you can.
Yeah, Ed, I think Gary's position was ed tech, because he had tech office.
Yeah, educational technology coordinator.
Where you went to get your technology fixed, and we were buying, before I got here, when I first started, we were buying used equipment or picking up pre-used equipment.
We were.
And if you had a breakdown, you went to ed tech, and we wanted to be more than, you know, we wanted to utilize the skills to take, you know, people on a journey of learning. That's kind of our goal here. But in terms of financing this, you're right about every grant we see, we jump on, and we're used to being rejected, but we've won quite a few. That's one of the reasons why we're still here with you guys. And then really, you know, you've got to look at, I say this all the time, is everybody wants to change, but nobody wants to change what they're doing. So you have to actually take a look at what you're doing, and you have to take components off that. So look at your enrollment, look and find out, are there 2 or 3 or 4 things in our current budget, and budgets are huge with all kinds of lines, that we can do without. And for us, at one point, it was a teacher in a certain grade level. We looked at the enrollment numbers, and we didn't need that. And we knew that we didn't need that for, you know, that grade level was going to go on. So that was going to free up $100,000 by the time we take off FICA and everything else on that. So that $100,000, Chromebooks were, you know, we can outfit a Chromebook with a case and everything else for less than $300. You can start doing a lot with a little bit of money here. So that was, you know, and once you do 100,000 with this group, and then 100,000, and you get on a recycle for every year, what's going to happen? You can really start moving along quite well.
And we also started looking at the same time at when we had textbook adoptions, right? We looked at, instead of purchasing printed sets of textbooks, the global studies class that Superintendent Mannix was talking about, we did the electronic textbook, which saved the district a lot of money. Our printing costs went down when we started collaborating and sharing. So that's a cost that can be recouped. So every time you do things, you kind of go into new areas where you gain more opportunities to continue to do more and more. So you certainly can't do it all in a day. But the further you go and the further you explore, the more things that you see as opportunities to change and adapt.
And we cut paper by 20%. We go through a lot of paper. So you start looking at every little item, and then you add them all up, and you can do it.
Yeah, that's it. It's stuff you would never thought we would have had to have thought about, schools, you know, this whole conversation we're having. So I think it's really helpful, especially from a perspective where you're a few years past, you started it early, but you're still thinking ahead.
We're learning every day.
Yeah, we really appreciate you sharing your insights on it, and we'll hopefully do it again. Hopefully everybody will be back to some normalcy come, well, who knows, next year maybe. But I think it'll be interesting to see how much of it you keep and how much people decide to add. And in the end, hopefully, I think it'll be a positive thing for everybody. But thanks a lot for sharing everything, and we will.
Yeah, one thing I just tell you is we didn't get here without a lot of help from other school districts and other people. So if anybody in the Brilliant Pathways family needs help, just reach out. We're happy to share, elaborate on our journey any way we can. It's the right thing for kids.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we appreciate that. We'll have people will send us queries, and we'll definitely hook you up with them. I appreciate you talking to Chris Bishop in Boston, and all the schools connecting and helping each other is really important. So thanks a lot, gentlemen. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Be
All
well.
right. Take care. See ya.